Welcome to the first episode of a brand new podcast called Not the Same, where my goal is to bring you true stories of real people sharing their personal testimonies of transformation. My name is Rachel Heimberg, and I will be your host. Before we get started with our very first guest, I want to give you a little background about how this came about and what my purpose is by doing this podcast. A few months ago, I was sitting with a group of ladies and began asking one of them about her life before she became a Christian. To my astonishment, she began to tell me one of the most inspiring stories that I had heard in a long time about what it means to be totally transformed by Jesus Christ. The person I saw before me was not in any way the person that I was hearing about. What struck me so profoundly during this conversation was the fact that most people might never know this about her. Listening to her that night made me realize that most people do not get the opportunity to share their full testimony of salvation. We might hear bits and pieces on occasion, but we never really get the full scope of what Christ has done in someone's life. Often we only see people as who they are without realizing where they've come from, who they were before, or to what extent their life has been changed. This conversation I had over some chicken and chips from Nando's made me not only see this woman in a completely different light, but inspired me to want to dig a little deeper with others as well. I knew there had to be many more people, each with their own unique story, that have a testimony worth sharing. So, this brings me to my ultimate goal with this podcast. We might never realize the impact of our testimony and what it can have on someone's life. Whether it's an unbeliever, a new believer, or even a seasoned saint going through a rough time, someone listening to our stories could be changed forever. I know for me, listening to this story made me realize again the power of God to truly transform someone's life. I hope the stories I plan to share with you listeners inspire you to perhaps see people differently, to see yourself differently, and to see our own journeys differently. Ultimately, to see God for who He is and what He is capable of doing in us when we surrender. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the very person who inspired this whole thing, Vuyiswa Mphaga. I met V almost 3 years ago when my husband and I first moved to Johannesburg. However, I've only recently got to know her in the last 6 months or so, when her and her family joined us here in El Dorado Park. They're currently serving with us in various ministries, and it is truly my privilege to have her here today. So, V, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being the reason we're here today.
Thank you so much.
And I say that genuinely.
Thank you, Rachel.
So I don't know where you want to start, but, maybe a little background on kind of how you were raised, and how that formed who you were and what that led.
Well, it's quite a long story, but I'll try and make it as short as I can. First, I was born to a 22-year-old woman, which had, I don't know the length of relations she had with my father.
Okay.
But from what I've heard from my granny, the stories have been so many in between that when I was born, my father then took off. They were never married or in any serious relationship from what I hear. But he just decided that he wasn't going to be there. So that meant, because my mother was working at the time in Johannesburg, that meant that at the time she could not have me and still work. So she battled with the decision of keeping me or having an abortion, which she decided, okay, now let me keep her. And because also she was so afraid of telling my granny, there were no men in my family that could help with the bringing up of others who were back in the Eastern Cape. Mm-hmm. So she was kind of like the hope. And being pregnant was not part of the plan. So, but eventually when my grandmother came to terms with the fact that she was pregnant, she gave birth to me. I'm not quite sure with the times of when did we separate, but I do know I was still probably months. Okay. From what she tells me, from what my granny tells me, months. And then so I had to go to the Eastern Cape where my grand's mom was. which is my grandmom, my great-grandmom, sorry. So she was very ill and elderly. So I think she just only lived about 6-8 months when I got there. And then she passed on, which meant my 14-year-old aunt and her sister, who was, I think they're only 2 years apart, had to take over.
Wow.
So that meant that literally she had to go to school, drop me off by some neighbors, come back, take care of me. That was the life.
So real quick, the time frame roughly when your 14-year-old aunt that you said had to kind of take over, how old do you think you would have been? Maybe just 1 or 2?
1 or 2. Just in between 1 or 2.
Wow.
I think that was the time.
And she was 14.
And she was 14.
Okay.
So yeah, I think around about that time. But we had relatives which now and then she would have to ask to look after me, and then after school come back. As she reminds me every day that my first words were mama. So I grew up calling her mom. I think I just realized that, in fact, she told me, my granny told me at the age of 12, actually, no, that's not your mom. Your mom is this lady that occasionally comes.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, it was a shock, but...
Was that a conscious revelation? Like you really thought that your aunt was your mom until
Because
that time?
I had no relationship with my mom. In my memory, the only relations I've had, she visited, and I think also because she never had time to bond with me as a baby, so it was kind of hard for her to be a mom. So she was just an aunt to me. And then she would come now and then go. But my mom was my 14-year-old aunt, which I still have a good relationship with today. So from there, obviously, she was just a teenager. Relatives would now and then come and take me over, and my memory for some reason does fail me at some point. I mean, there was so many things in between me staying with her, going from relative to relative, and my granny could only come I think once a year or maybe once in 2 years, same as my mom.
Okay.
My mom she was a domestic worker, so she was only allowed once a year to come.
Your mom?
My mom.
Yeah, okay.
So she could only just come once. But now and then we would frequent coming to Joburg. Okay. But that was just the basics of how I grew up. So that meant that I didn't really quite have a structure.
Okay.
I still remember my early memories, how I hated nights. I hated nights with all my heart because it meant that I don't know which house am I going to sleep at. I don't know where. I don't know who's going to take me today. And not everyone who was looking after me was doing it because they wanted to. It was more like a charity.
Yes.
Purpose.
Just shuffle from here to
just
there.
We helping so that they have something to say. So, and they would literally make me feel and understand that you don't belong here. Your mom is out there living her life. We have to take care of you. So that was my life growing up. And there was no real men except, which makes this longer than it ought to be, because my granny's sister, I constantly put her on my WhatsApp profile. So my granny's sister was a neighbor. She was married. She had a husband. And her husband was a self-appointed pastor of a Seventh-day Adventist church. So there was that. Okay. Which he was kind of he was okay. Yeah. He was okay. He was not as mean as everyone else. And then I had an uncle, my granny's only son. But my uncle was an alcoholic. He worked all his life, and when he was home, he was just always drunk. So it would be safe to say, growing up, I mean, obviously you
were surrounded by women,
Yes.
but the only men were not even present. They were just kind of there on the side.
No, they were really not present. And the grandfather who was present, he was the nicest man I thought was, until I later on realized that he was the meanest person ever, because he had all kinds of doctrines. My first introduction to God or to Jesus was through my grandfather, who made it clear to all of us that we're not part of his family, that we did not deserve the love of Jesus.
Oh, wow.
We would never be good enough for heaven. We would never be good enough for God. So he put in so early on in my life. So I never even tried with church or God or anything like that, because I was just like, I'm not, that's for, there's people, God has his own people. I'm not one of them. I'm an unwanted person. I'm an unwanted child. So what does God want with me? So there was him as well.
Okay.
So, but I do want to say though that in the community where I grew up, that was normal.
Okay.
The men were really, those who had fathers at home, the men were really absent. They were hardly ever involved in anything.
Even if they were there, they weren't present.
Even if they were there, they were not. It's either alcohol or other stuff, but they were just not there.
So what did that do to you? Not do to you, but like just mentally, how did that shape your worldview? How did that shape who you were growing up and seeing this? As you start getting older and now you realize this isn't my real mom. This is So how did that whole situation growing up, as you started getting your later teenage years or whatever, how was that? Like, what did that do in your mind?
My teens were really, really messed up.
Okay.
Because it was more like, now I'm starting to realize the truth. Because like I said, where I grew up, that was normal. To not have a father was not a big deal. I did not know, like, it's a thing to have a father. I just thought that's how we live. Women are strong. Women do this. Women do that. But it was not an issue, because all my friends didn't have fathers. All my neighbors, there were no fathers, so that was normal. Okay. But now as a teen, I had to come this side. I had to start my high school in Johannesburg. And then that started a whole new thing in my head, because everyone had a father. My friends had fathers, and life was different. And the realization that this is my mom. This is not my aunt, but she was, at that point, she was trying to get closer, but it was just so difficult.
For sure.
Because I was angry. I was angry not just because I grew up without her, but because of the abuse. There was so many abuses that happened in my childhood that I thought it was normal. I thought that it was normal to live like that. Also, the abuse she came and portrayed, because she will come as a disciplinarian, and then she will have to enforce discipline because she's told, oh, she's behaving this way. And I think also the anger she had probably towards me, reminder of my father who left, whatever issues she had. So we didn't have a relationship at all. I remember I would visit, I still stayed with my aunt. Funny enough, my 14-year-old aunt. At that point, she was a nurse working, so I stayed with her.
Okay, and she was here in Joburg as well?
She was here in Joburg.
Okay. So your mom still is just this figure who, like you said, comes in, disciplines, freaks out or whatever, and then...
Funny, when I was a teenager, she stopped the discipline. She did not have a say on my life. She didn't have a voice. She was just a figure that was there.
Wow.
Every decision was taken by my aunt and my granny, which were my two pillars at the time. So I was dealing with the anger that I had of her absence in my life.
Yeah. And now you're seeing your friends who have dads.
Yes.
And now you're thinking, oh, now I realize what I'm missing a little bit.
Because even when I tried at some point to question her, I did not get the idea that she was excited to talk about it. So it was... And I eventually just gave it up. And I was like, okay, I don't need the dad. I don't need her as well, so I'm just fine. But I was angry.
Yeah.
I was angry. My teens were very angry and dark.
Okay.
I just remember with visiting my friends now and then watching, even though their fathers were not saved or anything like that. But it was just amazing to me to see a man doing what he's supposed to do within a family. It was like, also men can be normal.
Wow.
Men are not always intoxicated. Men are not always just ruthless and angry and, so that was my life as a teen. I was really angry. And I think my hatred went beyond my family.
Yeah.
It was with every man I would meet.
Okay.
Be the teachers, be any male figure in my life. It was very hard to adjust.
And so would that cause you to, you said being angry, would that cause you to act out?
Yes.
Like towards men? And or was it more like, I don't need you, I can do this? Or how did that play out? As you're getting older now, you're going through high school, and now you said you're angry at all men.
Yeah.
How did that?
I acted out. I remember at some point I think it was my history teacher or something. At one time he called me and he said to me, you are an intelligent girl. I don't know why you're so rebellious. I don't know why you're so angry, and I don't know why you want to destroy your life. And me wanting to destroy because I made sure that I don't care, like if, especially with instructions, it was always hard to take instructions from men.
Yeah.
It was very hard, and I would be disrespectful for no reason at all. And I would miss out on tests. By then I was already smoking.
Okay.
And by then I was introduced to stronger alcohol, substances and stuff. So by then I would miss out classes, and with my friends we'll go smoke. And this guy called me aside and told me, I don't want to call your parents. I don't know what's wrong, but I just want to let you know that you are an intelligent girl and you can do better. I know you can. I've seen what you can do. You're smart.
Wow.
Why are you destroying? Even then, I didn't want to listen.
So what was your reaction when he said that? Did you just
I told him that he's not my father. He has no right to speak to me in that capacity. His job is to teach, and he should stick to teaching. I still remember that. It was really bad. It was because I'd taken upon myself this mask of, I didn't know how to express what I was going through. I couldn't put it into words and say, this is what I'm going through. So anger was my thing.
Okay.
Except for when I was with my friends. Those are the only people that made sense.
Okay.
So, but I was angry at home. I was just always silent and absent. So I would make sure that when it's supper time, I'm in my room. And I just did not want to be with, especially when my mom was around. So it was just anger everywhere. And I acted out with boys,
Okay.
I would, for an example, I get into relationships with boys that I knew I didn't want to.
Yeah.
But just so I could break their hearts.
Wow.
I just found fulfillment in seeing them broken.
Yeah, the control thing.
The control. I wanted to be in control. I wanted them to know that I can end the relationship.
And
I will do everything possible to end it before they do.
Wow.
So it was hard. It was really hard, and I was really self-destructive.
Yes.
Think,
Yeah.
So even for my aunt, at some point, she just didn't know what to do, because my life was really just spiraling down. And I just knew, without a doubt, I knew that 21st will be a big deal for me to get there.
Okay.
I didn't think I would make it to that age. Like I said, we were drinking, we were partying, we were going to dangerous places.
Yeah.
Dangerous
and
places.
How old were you? Were you still in high school, or were you getting close?
Early high school. I started early primary to drink and smoke. But early high school was more when we partied a lot. That would be I was in grade 8 or 13.
Wow.
13-ish. So 13-ish, 14, I was already drinking. I was already partying. I remember also at one point in my life, a moment where I was like, yeah, I'm not going to make it until 21.
Yeah.
I had gotten myself involved in this relationship. And it was with a relatively young boy. But I remember one time he placed a gun on my head. And he held me hostage.
Wow.
Took my phone, because I was telling him it's over, doing what I normally did with everyone else.
And he wasn't going to take it.
And he was like, no, I'm not going to take that from you. No, you don't end things, I do.
Wow.
And he held me hostage for some time, and my family did not know where I was. I saw this person that they meant business. They're going to kill me and no one will know where I was. And that was not the first instant, but that was the one moment where I knew that I'm not going to make it. But the weirdest thing, I was 14.
Oh my gosh, you were so young. I was
14. The weirdest thing was to think to myself that actually that brought the joy, the peace in me to say, at least I'll be gone and I wouldn't have to feel all the things that I felt inside of me. So that was, for some twisted way, that was it.
Yeah.
I felt like for me, that would be the best thing
you were looking
ever.
For something to end.
Yes, I was scared to die by a gun, but at the same time, I was like, end it.
Wow. So as we go past this age, you say you're just spiraling down.
Yeah.
What would you say, I mean, like, what ended up bringing you to the point where you said, okay, I've got to find something different? Did you try other religion? Did you try traditional things? Did you, at one point, or how old were you? At what point were you realized, okay, I have nothing left. I've got to do something.
Yeah. We did not have any traditional. For some reason, my family have never believed in ancestors. They didn't believe in anything, literally. So I did not have anywhere to. I remember at high school, though, there were some girls that would witness and tell me about Jesus. That only made me more angry because they portrayed Jesus in such a way that my grandfather did. That if you join us, then you will be the better one, the chosen one. They were separated, even though they were trying to witness. But the way they did it, it was just the same way my grandfather did it.
Yeah, and you had a bad taste in your mouth from
you're
before.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
So and my question will always be like, but where was Jesus when all these things were happening to me? So I was not interested. And I think inside of me, the only thing I feared, or the only good thing that I took from my grandfather, was that hell is real.
Wow.
And that stuck with me.
Okay.
Even though I would sin and think of committing suicide, I was so afraid of hell that I didn't want to go to hell and burn forever. So I think that kept me. But it was at the back of my mind. Yeah. Every time.
Well, truth is there, yeah.
Yeah, that, hell is a reality. But what really, when I started reflecting truly in my life, it's when we would go to parties with my friends. Okay. And we would drink heavy stuff. Drink just so we could pass out, literally.
Yeah.
But just when I was about to pass out, I would be sober like I just drank coffee. This happened a couple of times, and it was really annoying. It was the most annoying thing that I've ever felt, because here am I trying to fit in, trying to run away from myself. And when I get to the state where I'm just like finally free, I snap out of that and I'm back to free. And I would sit in those parties and I would look around me and I would be like, why am I here? Like, God, why did you even allow my mother to keep me? Why didn't she abort me? I would have so many questions, and I would be like, what's the point of all of this? These people, they have better things, they have better life, they have parents, but their lives. So I reflected a lot at that time in my life. Wow. Which was, I think that was the turning point. Because that didn't happen once. It will happen over and over. And I would tell my friends about it. And then they were like, no, man, something is not right with you. So, but eventually I stopped going to the parties. I withdrew. I went into a state of depression where I just didn't want to be around anyone. that was about the time when I think I was now 18, I was done with school.
Okay.
That's when someone came knocking by our house and invited us to church, told us about Jesus. And the first time I was really not interested. I was left alone, so I had to open and check who's on the door. So I was not interested. I just told him, I'm not interested. I closed the door, I went back.
Okay.
The same man came the following week. Saturday, I still remember it was on a Saturday. And this was annoying because normally my cousins are there, but they had sports. That was a season of sport or whatever. So I was left alone at home. And this man is back again, and he's telling me, if you had to die right now, where would you go? I think that was the second time he said that. And I remember that stuck with me. If I had to die, where would I go? And I knew exactly where I was. It was not a secret. Mm-hmm. I knew, and everyone around me knew, that I was just a ticking time bomb. Wow. Either I'm going to kill myself or something really bad is going to happen, or worse, I will die and go to hell.
Yeah.
So I didn't really answer him. I don't remember what I said. But again, third time he came, it was a group of them, I think. They were still doing outreach in the same complex. And funny enough, he came. And then I said to him, you know what, I'll come to church if you stop coming to the house.
God must have sent him there for you.
Because for some reason there was such conviction.
Yeah.
And he didn't say much, except for just repeating the same thing. Jesus loves you, Jesus. It's like, you know what, I promise you I'll come to church, just stop coming to my house and harassing me. And I remember negotiating with myself, should I go to church? Should I not? And I took my cousin. I was like, if I don't go, this man will come back. He's really persistent. I was like, okay, let's. And I did not own one single dress. I knew that you at least have to wear a dress when you go to church, something like that. So I didn't own any. So I was just like, this will do. Let's just go. So he will leave me alone. Wow. Took my cousin brother, and I remember walking in those doors and looking at everyone that was in the church. They looked like they were at peace. They looked so perfect. They looked like nothing I've ever seen. They were just like, and I remember something saying inside of me, you don't belong here.
Wow.
You don't belong here. Look at yourself. Look, and I think it was song service or something, and those girls at that time, they were about my age, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, I will never be like that.
Wow.
Never. So, and I wanted to go back, but obviously they were ushers, and now I'm going to have to negotiate with them. And I was like, I'm not in the mood. So we sat with my cousins and we made plans. Okay, we know they're going to pray at some point. We've been to some form of church and we've seen them pray. So when they pray, that's our chance to sneak out and go. We don't want to talk to these people.
Yes.
And then we planned, and true enough, the pastor preached and he started praying. But this time he was calling out for sinners, which was weird.
Okay.
And then my cousin and I, we nudged each other like, time to. Just when I was about to get up, there was this girl next to me and I was annoyed. I was so annoyed. And she was just there with a big smile. And she introduced herself and she told me, I am so glad you came. She was different from the girls that had invited me to church. She made me, I looked at her and she seemed like she meant what she was telling me. So I'm so glad you came to church. I just wanted to find out, do you have a relationship with Jesus? And I just remember she said a couple of things and she was young and I'm like, how is she knowing so much about Jesus and whatnot? And then she was just like, I want to tell you, Jesus loves you. There is no sin that he cannot forgive.
Wow.
She just went on talking, and I remember I just sat back on my chair and I think I was just crying without even knowing. Tears were just rolling down and she was like, come pray with me.
Wow.
And then I went, my cousin brother went. I don't know how long I was in that altar for, but I just remember feeling like there were bags and bags and bags of stones that were taken off me.
Wow.
And I felt like I just wanted to stay in that altar and never get up. Can I just stay here? Because of the peace that I've never felt for the first time in my life. I just felt loved. I felt like I belonged. I felt things that I've never felt before.
Wow.
Like just maybe there is hope for me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was my turning point.
That's crazy. So that's just amazing. And so how old were you?
I was 18, just turned 19, I remember. Between 18 and 19, somewhere around there.
Okay. And did you immediately continue coming to church like right away? I mean, did you, obviously you had issues you had to work through.
So from what I didn't mention was my addiction to smoking, to cigarettes. I at some point, I think I could smoke more than 10, 12 a day. And it was something I could not imagine myself living without. And I remember leaving the church and passing the place where I normally used to buy the cigarettes. I just remember, on Christmas Day, when you've just had so much food, that when someone offers you food, it's kind of like, what? I'm so full, I'm not even interested.
Yes.
I just remember feeling like that without even just like looking at that and being like, but why would I need that?
Wow.
And I walked and we went home, and she had told me about the service in the evening, and I was just like, well, we'll see. I wasn't far from church. It was just like 5-minute walk from church. So I was like, okay, fine, we'll see. Got home, told my entire family, so excited. Probably most of them was the first time in a long time they've seen me smile.
Oh, I'm sure.
I was super excited, and I just remember, obviously, as it normally happens, I guess, for everyone else. I remember my mom was there, and she told me that that's just a phase. I know you're gonna. It's just something you needed that, but no one has ever lived salvation in your age. That's way, way too difficult to attain. And I know that she didn't mean that in a bad way. That was just her, because she could not do that.
Exactly.
And my uncles, everyone else was just like telling me it's not possible, it's just a phase. And you know how it goes, telling me about all kinds of things, white man religion, blah, blah, blah. And I remember feeling a bit discouraged, thinking, was I maybe just too excited?
Was it fake?
Was it fake? Was it real? But I just remember, because I'm a really stubborn person. And I think there is a good in it.
Absolutely.
Because I've had to fight for my salvation.
Yes.
And that stubbornness helped. I even remember telling my uncle, who was telling me about, the people, who were the people that were there in the beginning of the Bible. It means we were not part of. And I remember, I don't know where that came from. I'd never read a Bible before. But I remember saying to him, I don't know about the people you're talking about. I don't even know who's Cain. I don't know who's Abel. But I do know one thing. Today, I felt loved. Wow. Today, I felt something. Everything else that was here is off. Cain did not do that. I don't know those people you're talking about. They did not do that. But I do know when I called upon the name of Jesus, something happened. And that cannot be fake.
Wow.
I just remember telling him that because of my stubbornness.
Yeah.
See, I was able to go to parties the whole weekend. But when I got saved, I fought with my family. At some point, we were locked out. At some point, we were chased away from home for going to church in the evening. And I remember telling them that you introduced me to alcohol. That was true. I learned alcohol at home. We would have supper and then we would drink. You introduced me to alcohol. You allowed me to go to parties. You allowed me to live such a dangerous life. Just when my life is starting to make sense, you fight it.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to let that go.
So your stubbornness kicked in? And
yes,
said no.
It kicked in. They would lock us out, my cousin and I, and we would stay there until wee hours of the morning. The church people would drop us there and then obviously go home. They didn't know what was happening because we would show up, big smiles, excited for these new people that are just so different and loving. I mean, there were grannies there that mothers that made us feel like, oh, this is what church is. You know, it felt so good. So we were not willing to let that go. And from then on, we just continued with church.
That's amazing.
My mom later on got saved. She got saved in our church. And
this is your biological mom?
This is my biological mom now. Wow. She got saved, miraculously saved. But so that's about the time when I'm engaged.
Okay, so I just want to get...
just before that.
I want to get on this real quick. Yeah. Real quick, because this is part of the story that really stuck out to me, because I've only known you as this beautiful wife and mother who has 4 beautiful children, a servant's heart. You cook, you bake, you give, and you give. So this is who I met when I first came here to Johannesburg. This is the Vuyiswa that I met. And then when we spoke, you started telling me about this other V that I know. I'm like, I don't know this woman.
Yeah.
So I think this, I want to touch on this a bit before we wrap it up, but just tell me a little bit about the situation when you came into church and your whole mindset about, I'm just here to serve God. I'm not interested in men. And how did that play out in your plan versus God's plan?
Yeah. So just after salvation, it was clear to me, this is where I want to be. This is where peace is. This is where joy is. But one thing I did not want was to get involved in any form of relationship with any man. I had told myself, I am done. My relationship with Jesus Christ is enough. I really, really want to serve. I want to love him. I just want to know who Jesus is. I don't need anything else. Then I walked in the church and guys started paying attention. And I was very quick to be, no, I'm not about to. So the lady that prayed with us on the day we were planning an exit, a quick exit, she later became my sister-in-law.
Okay.
Before then, she would insist on taking us home for evening services. It was a walk, just a 5-minute walk. And we would tell her, no, we're fine. We're used to walking at 9. But she would insist and be like, no, we want to make sure that you are safe at home. She had 2 brothers in the church. And she would literally drag her brothers with her. We need to take them. We need to take them.
Matchmaker.
Yes, and she had a plan. I didn't know at the time, but she was on a mission. So she would drag them all the way. And I just remember I used to just greet the guys. I really didn't want anything to do with men at that point. Later on, her brother became my husband now. But how it happened was he tells me that. I didn't know that until he told me. So he tells me that he was at the age where he wanted to get married. So he was going to revivals, checking out, maybe until he got to a place of saying, you know what, God, I want to get married at where I am. And right now there is no girl that I'm interested in. If there is a girl that I'm supposed to marry that is outside of this place, bring her in. And when you do bring her in, show me. Lo and behold, I walked in and God showed him. But he also was like, this is a raw convert. Yeah. I am very skeptical about this. I'm not sure.
Second-guessing his
his praise. But just to fast forward the story, he started praying. And God was just directing him towards me. So he created a distance so that he's not clouded. Yeah. At the same time, I had no desires for anything. And he started praying that if it's her, put whatever that I have in me, put it in her. And at that point, I had started coming morning prayers. And he had been praying, and I just remember all of a sudden starting to look at him, and we would just have like moments where we just talk, but it was different than other guys. It was not like the way I would converse with the other guys in the church, but with him it was like, what's happening? And immediately I started praying against. Now I've learned to pray. So I'm praying for everything. I'm like, God, I don't need this. I don't want this. You remember what I said when I came in here. I just want to know you. I don't want anyone else in between me and you. Eventually
So you're praying against
I'm
this.
praying against
and
this.
then Ed is praying for this.
Yes.
And now we got to find out who wins.
So he won. He won because I just remember coming one morning to prayer and him coming, and at that time it was pretty obvious, I think, even to the pastor, let's just get it over and done with.
Yeah.
Because I was just resisting, but at the same time it was not as strong as it was before. And he just came in. Obviously he won because here we are with 4 kids. But it was something I truly, truly felt so strong about in my heart that I did not want. First, marriage was never part of my life. Never any idea. Even when we would play as kids, there was never a part where I was someone's wife.
Wow.
It was not part of the plan. It had never been part of the plan. Being a mom was worse. You would never find me with any baby. Babies were just like weird, and I never wanted to touch any babies. Even my granny would tease me later on and be like, I never thought. If anyone would have told me you would have so many kids, I would have said it's a lie. Wow. Because one would have been a lot for you. Yeah. I was not domesticated at all. I could not cook when I married my husband. I did not know what happens in the kitchen. I had no interest in being a mom, a wife, a stay-at-home mom. None of that was part of my plan. But for some reason, I feel like God just turned my heart in different direction, completely different from where I had planned.
You know, I was thinking then what to name this podcast, you know, and you're the first person. Yeah. And what stuck out to me is when you met Jesus, you were not the same. You were not the same person. You didn't have the same, you know, we know in the scripture it says, you know, through Christ, we become, you know, new creation, old things are passed away and things become new. And it's like, that's literally, you embodied that by everything that you were against. Yeah. After Jesus, it's like you're totally different. Because like I said, I met the woman before me who I so admired when I met, and I'm like, beautiful, well-behaved children. I know you guys have pastored before. And, you know, you're even in the church now, you're a blessing to our church. You know, you and Ed are in charge of our children's ministry right now. And just seeing this woman before me who loves her children and cooks and bakes and is a wife, and you just think, how is this come from this? And it's Jesus Christ, right? It's the transforming power of Jesus. And that's really the whole reason I wanted to talk to you and wanted to give you this platform to share your testimony, because it was just so powerful to me. I thought, people need to know this about you. Like, you know, it's not every day that we get a chance to really dig deep and go into who we are, you know? And it was just really powerful. I think that we've covered kind of what I wanted to cover. Yeah. I think that's a good place to stop it. So first of all, I want to thank you for not only being our first guest, but being the inspiration behind this entire project. I think your story is going to be helpful. You know, hopefully as we get more listeners, people will hear this and realize, wow, if God can do that for her, what can he do in my life too? Because again, that's the purpose of this. And I want to thank anyone that's listening right now, because if you made it this far in this episode, I'm really, really grateful. Without listeners, stories can't be heard. So in conclusion, we're going to try to get these episodes every other week. So if you share with friends, subscribe, whatever, I encourage you guys to do that. We don't ever know the impact of somebody's testimony who's been changed through Jesus Christ. And before we close, I just want to say, if you are not a Christian and you're listening, or maybe you were a Christian at one point and you turned away, but you say, you know what, I want to come back, or I want to try this, I want to see what God can do in my life. In the Bible, we know John 3:16, it tells us salvation is God's free gift to anyone who asks. And so just a simple prayer can be the beginning of your new story, like it was for Vuyiswa. If you want to do that, all you have to do is acknowledge you're a sinner, recognize Jesus paid the price for that sin, and then ask him to forgive you. And I promise you, he will. Like V said earlier, Jesus loves you. And that's it. Until next time, I'm Rachel Heimberg, and you've been listening to Not the Same.